Hello, welcome to Egghead Anarchy. This is the third installment of our month-long series on the St. Louis Game Dev Duel 2016, and I'm Bryan Maynard. Alex is not here today. He is off gallivanting around the globe having lots of fun. So it is my pleasure to interview Nate Haskins and Robert Smith of BunnyGun Games. BunnyGun Games is a St. Louis game dev studio. They work with VR. They have a game currently available called Halloween Dreamworld. And they are also working on a game for the Game Dev Duel 2016 here in St. Louis. So we're going to talk to them about their game. We're going to talk to them about what they're doing for the Game Dev Duel. And we're going to talk to them about running a studio and what they've learned and things like that. So without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, and now we're going to interview Nate Haskins and Robert Smith of BunnyGun Games. Nate Haskins is the owner and technical director of BunnyGun Games, a lifelong gamer. He got his start with creating 3D content as a scientific animator at the University of Rhode Island. More recently, he has a VR exhibit, he was a VR exhibitor at the St. Louis TEDx. He is now focused on making video games and experiences with a special emphasis on virtual reality. And Robert Smith is the audio director for BunnyGun Games. He has almost 2 decades of experience producing music as a hobby. Since joining BunnyGun, he has been able to combine his 2 passions in life, video games and music. Creating games with BunnyGun has given him the opportunity to share his love of music and video games with the world in a VR setting. So BunnyGun has a focus on VR, which is really interesting to me. Last weekend, I got to do an actual demo of the PSVR, and before that, I was pretty skeptical of VR, period. I'm old enough that I've seen several attempts at VR, and none of them were successful. None of them took off. One of which was the Virtual Boy.
Oh yeah, Virtual Boy.
That's good times. Oh, really quick, why don't you guys say hi so that we know who's who? So Nate Haskins.
Hey, Nate Haskins here.
Awesome. And then Robert Smith?
Hey, how you doing?
Awesome. Sweet. So let's just jump right into it. How did you guys start BunnyGun, and what's kind of the history of the studio?
Well, all right. So it kind of runs parallel to the history of VR, really. So I was kind of excited about it back when the first development kit came out. This is after the Kickstarter. And a buddy of mine pitched in half on it. So we ended up purchasing it. And waiting for it for a few weeks to come in. And when we first tried it on my MacBook, it took a while to get it going. And 2 things became apparent to me really quick. One, that this was something brand new that I'd never experienced before, and it's something special. And 2, that I got motion sickness immediately from using it. So even though that was there at the time, I thought there was something there in VR. So that's kind of at the beginning of, it was kind of before BunnyGun started, but that was kind of the beginning of the path to this road to creating BunnyGun.
Nice. So when was BunnyGun actually incorporated? Like, when did you guys actually start up?
Well, BunnyGun is actually it's doing business as of my web development company, Haskins Information Technology LLC.
Oh,
so
nice.
BunnyGun came into registered existence about a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Very cool. So if I'm correct, you guys actually have a game that is available, a VR game that's available right now. What is that game?
It's called Haunted Dreamworld.
Oh, very nice.
And basically, you start off, you're a kid in detention, and in the middle of detention, you kind of doze off, and when you kind of awaken, so to speak, you're in a old English style, 1800s style farm.
Kind of that
creepy old,
yeah,
kind of like the creepy old farm, and you basically. You have certain things that you need to do. Should I tell them?
Well, I mean, maybe don't pitch the whole entire game up front, but like Rob is saying, it's basically kind of a Sleepy Hollow type of vibe to it. And
oh wow,
the kind of the inspiration for making games for me is going back to the old Space Quest and the King's Quest and these kind of adventure games where you talk to people and find items to progress the storyline. So Halloween Dreamworld goes down pretty much like that, where you run into somebody who gives you a quest, and then you go through the level to try to complete different pieces of the quest. You don't necessarily fight things, but you solve puzzles and progress the storyline.
Interesting. So working on, and by the way, is it Halloween Dreamworld or Haunted Dreamworld?
It's Halloween Dreamworld.
Halloween Dreamworld. Perfect. So working on Halloween Dreamworld, what was the biggest challenge? Because it sounds like you guys got in kind of like on the ground floor, like you were saying, to VR. And so you probably, I would imagine, bumped into a lot of the same problems that everybody else did without a whole lot of knowledge from other people to help you along the way. So like what were the challenges that you faced and that you overcame working on this?
Well, okay, Halloween Dreamworld was our first, I'll say, official effort to try to bring a product to market. So from a technical standpoint, there was a lot to learn just ramping up through. Well, first it was pick an engine, right? Because the Oculus itself has an SDK, but it's not necessarily the greatest thing to develop with. So we looked at the Unreal Engine and we looked at the Unity engine. And at the end of the day, we chose the Unity engine for building that. So it became this process of first learning how to use Unity, which was its own learning curve.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a learning curve there.
Wow. So that was probably about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago at this point. So we've come pretty far with that. And then also a way of looking at this, we've looked at this not in terms of necessarily building just a title. We're trying to build out a studio model with this BunnyGun Games effort. And so part of the effort was learning how to work with sound and learn how to work with tech and then mix those two, we'll call them departments together. And make them work well, and try to keep track of that complexity that adds to the project. So those are things we learned while creating this game.
That is a really good thing to bring up. So it sounds like one of your initial challenges that you wanted to work to overcome was the process of making a game, not necessarily just, like you said, what technology do we use? What's the point of the game? Kind of the mechanics of the game itself, but the more process oriented stuff, right?
Right. I mean, I kind of look at this. So my history as a web developer, I've been writing software for about a decade now, and some of that is about workflow, essentially. So just bringing a product to market, it's cool to have a great idea for a game. Like we have a lot of ideas that we just can't do right now because of the scale of our studio. So it was kind of about picking the right amount of work to bite off and then coming up with a production that could actually deliver on that and then get it to the market. And actually another challenge is once you have your game finished, getting it through the stores. Like the Oculus Store, for example, is very difficult to get into, at least for us. And there's more like tribulations with that too. I could go on about if you wanted to hear about that, but
yeah, actually, if you could dive into that just a little bit, because I know back when the App Store first came out years ago, that was a big hurdle for a lot of people. There was this assumption that getting into the App Store was this simple, straightforward process, and that wasn't true at all. And that actually derailed a lot of app efforts initially. So could you dig into that a little bit? Sure.
I mean, so let's talk about when the Development Kit 2 is out. For example, that was the last big piece of hardware that developers got in their hands before the consumer release model came out. And that piece of hardware is not equivalent to the one that came out by any means. They're very different in terms of performance. And so there was this time period around 2015, probably like third quarter, fourth quarter, where the development community or the developers at Oculus said to the development community, hey, indie devs, get your games ready. We're going to have you submit them to our store so you can get them prepped ahead of time. And then you'll be all set. We'll get the new hardware in your hands and you'll be good to go for when we launch. So there was a lot of excitement around that. And you can read this on Reddit. But the actual reality of the situation, we had our game ready to go 1.5 days after that announcement in their store. And it didn't get reviewed for 8 months.
Whoa.
And so, excuse me. There was one point where they said it was allowed in.
Yeah, we were jumping for joy. They approved it.
They approved it, but then it was a computer glitch. So then they unapproved it.
Oh no.
So that was a tough moment. So there's that. So basically what happened is I also put in an order for the consumer hardware because I figured at this point they weren't actually going to get me any hardware to work on my game because I couldn't finalize this game until I had the CV1 hardware. Couldn't even get it on the market. So what ended up happening is launch comes around and Oculus went with about 30 different publishers and they looked to be all pretty AAA or very good or very known publishers. And I didn't see a lot of indie dev content come out. And then Reddit kind of blew up with it saying, what the heck? How come no one's reviewing our games? And then in one massive sweep, they just declined what I'm guessing is hundreds of games and it really came down to this. I think this is my own theory about this is that they didn't have the capacity to go back and say to everybody, look, we released new hardware. Clearly your software is not up to date with our SDK. That's number one. You just can't do it because you don't have the hardware. And then two, they didn't have time to review all those games. They had a very focused launch. So I think their overarching strategy is that they're going to ramp in the indie devs slowly. So right now, for example, Halloween Dreamworld is approved for Oculus Key distribution. but it's not approved for the storefront. And I've submitted the game several times after upgrading SDKs and upgrading the graphics and stuff, but they give you no feedback. They just either say yes or no. Not like, hey, your game is not technically sound, or hey, the graphics aren't up to grade. Okay, if you said the game sucked, at least you're giving me some feedback. Like, all right, then we'll make the graphics better. All right, we'll enhance this. But they give nothing. And, I had to email them to get them to even respond to me. So I'm not 100% happy with that process right now at Oculus. So that's a challenge. Distribution can be a tough one. So the way we've been looking at it at BunnyGun is this model of like, it's almost like working backwards. How do we get to market and then build a production around that and build a game around that and then go for it?
Yeah, I think even just working on the little game that I'm working on for the Slow Jam, and actually Butterscotch Shenanigans in the talks that they've given at the St. Louis Game Dev Co-op, they've said the exact same thing, that unfortunately, kind of one of the least important parts of game development is actually making the game. The advertising the game, getting it out there, the process of development and distribution is far more important, because no matter how good the game is, if you make it, if people don't know that it's there and if it's not available and easy to get, people aren't going to get it. And so it's, you know what I mean?
It's a fine balance, I'd say, for sure, because on the other hand of that, too, if you make a real stink bomb of a game and you massively advertise it, you will get sales, but you may not get your next title out there. But I definitely hear them that it's important that the marketing's got to come first, because as you just mentioned, if no one knows about it, it could be the most epic game ever invented, but no sales.
Yeah. Well, and somebody just posted an article that was on, I believe it was Kotaku, and I forget the name of the game. I'll put a link in the show notes, but it talked about an indie dev who worked for 5 years on a game. It looks like it was like a side scroller, 2D side scroller, maybe 3D side scroller. Okay. And they put a bunch of time into this game, and it was really good. It was technically very, very good and very well designed, but they made a lot of non-development errors and missteps. And the game ultimately ended up failing. And it was kind of like a retrospective look at how and why that happened. And it's kind of, I think, a good warning bell to developers that echoes kind of what you're saying, that there's a lot of things, like just getting into the Oculus store can be a pain. And learning from that process is huge,
Absolutely.
So like, what process-wise, really quick, what do you think is the biggest thing that you have found, biggest decision that you've made regarding like the audio and the technical aspect, like you said, merging those two things, that has benefited you all, that has benefited the studio?
That's a good question. I'd say at a high level, team. Surround yourself with people that are aligned with the same goals. Don't try to do it alone necessarily. But beyond that, I'd say good communication is pretty key.
Yeah, I was going to say good communication too.
Yeah, do you want to talk to that, Rob?
Yeah, coming into this, I didn't have any experience with like the networking or how, you go about doing like, computer networking or, all that stuff that Nate does and web development and all that. So, for me, the communication, we use things like Slack and Trello, and those have made the process, communicating, passing files back and forth with each other has been, it's been vital, to what we do. And, so I would definitely say that surround yourself with the right people who are just as passionate as you, and then having good communication between those two. Like I can tell Nate, hey, I don't like that idea, and here's why. And we or he can do the same to me. And, and it's just, the whole process, there's things that come up during the process where you have to make these decisions. Do we keep it? Do we get rid of it? Do we change it? And just being able to talk to, and have somebody kind of easygoing and be able to hash those things out with and move forward.
It is good to have like-minded folks, and it's a shout out to the St. Louis game development community. That's we just got into that. We just started going to the drink ups, and then this is our first the Dual Jam's our first event we've been participating in with that community. Cool. So I guess the question was kind of about process. So as Rob mentioned, the right tools, and then trying to keep track of deadlines, essentially. Yeah. So when you're doing a game, too, the idea of wearing a hat of being just the production supervisor is a good idea. Looking towards film and the film process is, at least for me, has been helpful to look towards how to develop games. And there's a lot of overlap there.
Moving on from Halloween Dreamworld, you guys are doing a game for the Game Dev Duel, the Slow Jam, that's going on this month, correct?
Absolutely.
So in the context of BunnyGun, where does this game fit? Is this something that you're kind of like a prototype learning experience just for this month that will be kind of let go, or is this something you want to continue working on after the duel is done?
Well, two parts. Rob, you want to take the audio side of this?
Yeah.
Let The Mega Mix, for example.
Oh yeah. So, well, to answer your question real quick, I think we're gonna continue working on this even after the game jam. I think it fits pretty good into BunnyGun and in the concept that we have going. We basically just get into details.
Sure, maybe the elevator pitch of what we're doing.
So basically, you're just a random person, and you go into a costume party, and you see all these different people, in different costumes and everything like that. You can interact with a few of them, and then depending, they'll ask you each character that you can interact with will ask you a series of questions, and then depending on your question, will determine what costume you're wearing at the party. In a nutshell.
Essentially, it's kind of like when you go on Facebook and there's a quiz like what Harry Potter major you. This is like a 3D version of that where you go in and as you answer questions, you determine your personality. And then at the end, you get to see who you are in costume. Because the theme of this jam was character. So we really tried to do character all the things. And so there's several characters in this game. From a BunnyGun perspective, it's a great opportunity to work on our character animation. And then from an audio opportunity, I've given Rob some unique challenges. Like, for example, there's a continuous dance hall mix going on that Rob came up with from scratch. But the trick to it is it had to loop continuously. So getting that all right and to work in the context of the game was its own fun challenge. But we're pretty happy with how it's coming along.
Yeah, that music was really it was a lot of fun to make, too, because it was right on my alley. It was kind of like techno, dance music, and I really liked doing that. And then I reached out to a good friend of mine, Dave Jones, who uses the same program I do. We both use Fruity Loops, and we kind of grew up using Fruity Loops together. We would always bounce ideas off of stuff and off each other and stuff. And so he's got a track on there as well, and him and I collaborated on a track, and then I did one of my own tracks, and then basically him and I met up one day. I got the tracks from him and then mixed it into Fruity Loops and then shipped it out to Nate, and the music was done. It was
rest is history, right?
Yeah, the music was done at that point. So then recording, sound, we reached out to a few friends.
Man. Yeah, talk about the audio recording. That's speaking of workflow.
Yeah, so basically we reached out to a couple of friends of ours because one of the things that we faced in this game that we didn't face in the Halloween Dreamworld was multiple characters. I mean, we have a couple characters in Halloween, but in this one we have probably
I think total count of about like 14
different characters. So,
oh wow.
So we had to reach out to a couple of friends, and basically we accumulated all of the audio recordings, and then I took them and we were communicated through Dropbox using that, and then I'd get all the files through Dropbox and I'd scrub them in Fruity Loops and then ship that out, and then I would convert those files to WAV or to MP3 files, and then put a gain on it to like a decibel to make sure that everything was playing at the same volume. So going into Unity, everything was at the same volume, and then we could go from there. Because what you end up happening is, if you have multiple files recorded at different volumes, there's no gauge to what you need to turn up or turn down, so everything doesn't sound right. So you've got to be on the same level going into Unity, and then
that's it. Because then technical department catches it, and then your audio is all a different level, and it's a freaking nightmare. You got to adjust inside of Unity. Yeah. So we found out if you equalize it all out, you don't run into that problem. This is such learning process stuff. I'm sure seasoned developers know all about this, but
this is like a learning thing for us. Yeah, we learned it, and you were asking about was there any references or videos or articles? Nate actually has posted stuff. So I don't know if has posted some stuff on YouTube, on the
YouTube.com/BunnyGun Games. Yeah.
So very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So he's got some tips, and we did some audio how to basically kind of use Fruity Loops and Unity together. And we're going to continue to make more movies or more videos. And
there's actually some videos up there about character. We're using a certain type of character for these, so I show some tutorials about how to rig them and basically how to animate them and set them up. So those have been pretty popular. But from a production side, once audio is done, I catch all these files, import them into the game, and then kind of adjust them from there. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, that's really cool. So how much time would you say that you have had to devote to this game, or what has been the split between this and Halloween Dreamworld, if active development is still happening for that game, for the last month? Because we're coming to the end of the game jam now.
Well, Halloween Dreamworld has been completely on hold for the entire month. All my free time has gone into, even some of my not free time has gone into developing this title for this game jam. So I mean, hours wise, I'm probably putting in like at least 10 to 20 a week.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think
Very cool.
pretty much at this point, audio is wrapped up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think altogether, I may have put in 4 or 5 hours, maybe 8.
Maybe more than that. Yeah, probably.
Maybe
like
if I
8 to 10.
all the music production.
Because you were over here just like producing.
That's true.
audio
All the
with me all the time.
recording, all the audio. So maybe about 8 hours. Yeah.
Sounds about right. And then all the individual sessions too, because more workflow, for example, we have one spreadsheet for audio. And on that spreadsheet, it shows the file name, the line, the actor, and then the dates that are going to come up. So I kind of stuck Rob with like wrangling in the voice actors and setting up the mics and stuff and getting them recorded and down on that spreadsheet. So there's a lot of like time sucks in this development process that you can't anticipate. So it's almost like we tried to build a game. Okay, so we've got 4 weeks. We're trying to build a game in 3 weeks. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a well, at least for development anyway. I'm a web systems developer, and there's kind of a general rule that is however long I think something will take, double that, and then add 10%, and that's the actual amount of time that it will likely take.
That sounds good. Yeah. That sounds real good.
So you mentioned that you guys are fairly new to the St. Louis Game Dev Co-op group and the meetups and all that kind of stuff. What got you into coming to those?
Well, so I saw them on Meetup at first, and I thought the concept was really cool. And it was one of those things where I was like, well, I'll go next week. I'll go the next week after that. But it got to the point where I felt like with BunnyGun, we'd evolved to the point where we actually have something to show. And we actually want to like dip into the community with some experience. So it was probably at that point we went to the first drink up at the Orbital Pinball, which was a lot of fun. A lot of cool people there. And so after that, I decided that this was like a really cool community that we wanted to be part of and that we could contribute to. And also part of that bigger, as indie devs, it's kind of nice to have that network of folks where if somebody wants to jump in and do some voice talent, maybe they don't have another project, but they could come in on like a BunnyGun game and then get some experience that way. So all of that made us sign up. So we're part of I forget what they call it, the sponsored tier for the STL game development. And so since then, we've been coming out to the events we can make.
That's very cool. Very cool. So what do you, I have a specific question about the Game Dev Duel. What do you guys, what are your thoughts on the achievements that they have?
I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
One of the things that I noticed right off the bat was I composed 3 original tracks. So
You went all over that.
Yeah, when I saw that, I looked over at Nate and I was like, yeah, we got that. Don't worry about that one. I like the fact that, they're adding the arch into it. I think that's kind of cool. And there's a lot of other ones that, I think going to the drink up meetings, making that an achievement, I think that's also a really good idea.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because it does get you out there and Wes covers some stuff that you get you thinking about how to do it. And he's had some really good pointers and stuff. So it's definitely valuable to go. Yep. But I like the idea. It'll be interesting to see where we stand in the rankings because
it should be because we haven't been like officially checking in.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't. We've missed a couple of the drink ups due to like work schedule, conflicts and stuff.
Doing
life
the work
in general.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's one about version control. It's like, well, as much as I want to check it in publicly, there's too much stuff that's like proprietary.
Yeah,
like I can't just go putting a copy of like, I don't know, Cinema Director on Git.
Yeah.
But that said, we are using private version control. There's a program through Unity. It's called Unity Collaborate. It's in private beta right now, but we got an invite to it, and it works very nice for Unity developers. It's kind of like Git without any of the hassle, and it's all managed through Unity. So we're using some of that too.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah, I saw that. I'm just using the free version of Unity right now. I want to, like, when I get closer to releasing, I want to upgrade to the full one, like the paid or whatever. But I'm interested to see technically what Unity Collaborate is using under the covers, because I find it very hard to believe they would build their own like CVS system, you know what I mean? Like version control system. So I'm wondering if they're actually using Git and they just provide a nice UI like over top.
Does
that seem maybe?
I mean, I've talked to the developers about it and they certainly have Git on their mind. In fact, they were talking about like a unity.ignore file to manage some of this stuff. So it's possible. I also mentioned to them we were using Dropbox before that, which actually has its own advantages. If it's set up correctly, you can sync Dropbox files between all the different users. And what's nice is you can isolate it too. So for audio, for example, I don't have to share the entire project with Rob. I just share that audio folder inside the Unity project. And anytime he updates the audio, the Unity project updates. He doesn't have to touch it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. That's been a lot,
cool.
especially on my hand when, I'm still I still have to learn the audio stuff on Unity. So I basically take my files and dump it right into Dropbox.
Yeah, and Art does the
done.
same thing. We have PSDs in there. Art can go in, just update the PSDs and save it, and they're done. So it's kind of the seamless approach. Whereas if you're using Unity Collaborate, you got to pull down a 17 gig file, so it's a little bit heavyweight. So we're not doing that for this. We started with it, but they actually cap out at 15 gigs. So I mailed the company and asked for more space. Didn't hear anything back, but it's not a problem. We figured out a way around it.
There you go. It's the way it works. Get problems, find solutions. Heck
there you go. Got to keep going. There's deadlines. This end of the month is coming up fast.
Yeah, it is coming up.
Yeah. So so you said this is your first game jam that you've done, right?
That's correct. First game jam.
So what are your thoughts on so typically game jams tend to be like 48, 72 hours, whatever, and they're very focused. And Wes has brought up a couple times the difference in that this is actually, and so I did the global game jam last year, and then this
we
is my
wanted to
second
make
one.
that. We just couldn't get there because
Yeah.
I think we just talked about it. Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is this is much harder than the global game jam was, and for exactly the reason that Wes has said in the meetups, which is, when it's 48, 72 hours, it's focused, there's no life distractions, there's no bills, there's no grocery shopping, whatever. But this is regular everyday life. You know what I mean? So there's the day job, for me, there's kids, there's all kinds of stuff. And then whenever I can, I get to work on the game. And I'm interested as like a first time, as an introduction to game jams, kind of what your thought is. Like, is this another project, like a month-long project, or do you guys see this differently than working on Halloween Dreamworld?
In my opinion, I don't really see it any differently than working on Halloween Dreamworld. We were kind of set up to take this on when we came into it. We not realizing that this was going to be more difficult than a 48 or 78 hour. Because we have a team that's already set up. Now, I think if you're, if you're part of a team where you guys aren't, friends, or you're not used to working with each other, I mean, that's a whole other set of problems you're going to have to overcome. So I think that coming into this, I think we were set up as well as anybody could be to take this on,
to have a team together already.
Yeah. And then, like, as we talked about communication, just being able to communicate between the technical side and then the audio side of it. So I haven't had a whole lot of hard time with it. I know you spent a lot more time on it than I have, but
to me, okay, to your first question, I think that the longer, slower jam can be more difficult, as you mentioned, because you're now contending with the rest of your life. You're not just sitting there for 24 to 48 hours or working in that time frame. And as Rob mentioned too, it is nice to go in with some folks that you already know or have a good working relationship with. So I think the shorter jams are by nature a little easier. For example, I went to a hackathon one time, and this is web development, but we had 24 hours to write some software. And I found that I was able to work for, maybe 15 to 20 hours straight on one project and stay focused. Whereas with the slow jam, all of a sudden I got dishes piling up in the sink or something, or like someone can't make a meeting, or, so there's a lot of little things that can go wrong. So this goes back to production and scheduling, is having those things on paper and getting people committed to show up at the time so you can actually build a reliable production. Kind of kept us on track to be able to hit this deadline.
So for anyone listening who is maybe struggling with their game dev project now for whatever reason, what if you had one piece of advice to give an individual developer or team working on a game who's kind of where we're at in this right now, who's been working on their project for a while, getting close to the end or what should be the end, and they're just kind of lost, right? Like they don't know, when should I start focusing on the marketing and all that kind of stuff? When should I start worrying about social media or getting people to know about the game? How do I know when the game is done? And I realize this is an extremely broad set of questions, but like what advice would you give to someone in that situation?
Okay, so the advice I'd give, not that I'm super qualified, I don't have any great deal of success in game development yet, but I would say kind of know your limits, especially for this jam. Try to take your concept and then put it within a scope. And then the other thing too is if you've done this and you're like, oh man, I'm still out of time, go for your minimum viable product. Try to make that game technically work, and then go back and work on your art and aesthetics, because I'm finding that in that process, your character animation, your aesthetics, your lighting, all that can be tweaked indefinitely. You can always make it better. But from a technical standpoint, does your game work or not? There's a yes and no. It's a very binary thing. So those kind of binary decisions to make the game actually work, for me anyway, I like to prioritize that stuff first and then go back and elaborate on the game over time. And then the second thing I'd say too is you mentioned that tragic story of that 5-year developer who made a great game but just couldn't get the marketing. Other times the market just won't bite on your concept, even if you put it out there. So I'd say in the world we live in now, where games cycle over so fast, it's almost interesting just to do your press kit and get your concept and get a little bit of game and put it out there. And let the fans get a hold of it, let the networks get it, let the Steam Greenlight community take a stab at it, and just see if you've got something before you spend a huge amount of time on it.
Oh, interesting. Kind of like get it in front of as many people as early as possible, even if it's not necessarily something that you think is polished.
Right.
Like you said, if it binary works, right? If the systems if the core gameplay is in place and that works, but it's not maybe as pretty as it could be, get that out there and see if people are interested. And then if they are, then continue to make it pretty and polished. Is that kind of...
That's what I'm getting at, yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
because Xbox, Microsoft has done something like that now, where you can buy part of a game, the version of a game, it's not even completed yet.
Right.
So I think that they're taking that, into heart too. Because I forget the game. It was like Layers of Fear, I think, was the name of the game, and you could buy a version for like $15 or whatever, and then they would give you, I think, the game once it was done and completed.
I like that model too, where that's almost like the fans buy in and have almost, it's not really like an equity position, but they're invested in your game at that point. They'll pay that $15 up front, they get the beta access, and then they also help you build your game. And I think that's a great process too, is having your game, have as many people as you can play it early on and tell people about it. You don't want to develop a game in like your own isolated chamber and get souped up on your own idea, because the ideas, some of my ideas I think are great, and then I pitch them to a few people. I'm like, well, maybe that's not as hot as you think it is. And that process is pretty valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been really great, guys. Thanks a lot for coming in and talking to us. Again, this is Nate Haskins and Robert Smith of BunnyGun Games. They currently have Halloween Dreamworld available via Steam, via Key on Oculus. And we will provide, in their website, bunnygun.com, we'll provide links to all those locations in the show notes. And I want to thank you guys again for coming by, and we will see you guys next week.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us on the show.
All right, and that is our show for the day. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed yourself. Hope you had a good time. I say we. Oh my God, I'm so used to having Alex here. This is crazy. I'm sure Alex does, actually, now that I think about it. I'm sure that he hopes you listened and had a good time as well, but I don't want to speak for him. I mean, that's not really, my thing. I don't want to speak out of turn. So I will say, I hope that you enjoyed the interview with Nate Haskins and Robert Smith of BunnyGun Games. Hope you learned some stuff. Hope you had fun. And we will see you next week when we'll be talking about Star Trek Beyond, and Alex will be back. Thanks.